Hello, I want to talk to you about what the words Black Lives Matter actually convey from a linguistic perspective and how you can know that that meaning is actually true. Welcome. Now, before we go into the meaning of the words Black Lives Matter and the way this is communicated, I want to tell you one short story. And this is a story that happened in one of the little villages in Germany. And this is a story where a news reporter was very dissatisfied with the decisions of the local city council. So he wrote in the newspaper an article that was headlined, "Half the city council members are idiots." Now that created an uproar and he had to take it back. So on the next day, the newspaper article had to show that he took it back. And what he wrote was, "Half the city council members are not idiots." And I find that funny because he literally took it back. He said the opposite, but actually he didn't take back anything. So why is that funny? How does that work? Linguistically, it's because there are certain things we say literally in a sentence. The house is green. Then there are certain things that we presuppose. When we talk about the greenhouse, we presuppose that there is a greenhouse. And there are certain things that we imply. And this newspaper article is actually a good example. We imply something. So half the city council members are not idiots. But what about the other half? That's the question that's naturally raised. And it's implied that if we state explicitly that half the city council members are not idiots, then the other half are. So with this little story in mind, let's look at what Black Lives Matter actually says. So let's start looking at the actual logo. So this is the logo of Black Lives Matter that you all know. And when I first saw this or heard this slogan, then I thought immediately, hey, Black Lives Matter, what about the other lives? Shouldn't it be all lives matter like this? And very soon I found on the internet that people had said, well, that's actually racist because it erases the need of the Black people. So let's find out what one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement actually says about all lives matter.
My name is Alicia Garza, and I'm one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter. To say all lives matter in response to Black people saying that Black lives matter, it's actually saying that Black lives don't matter. What's important for you to know is that it's only a threat to you if you believe that Black people should be inferior.
Well, sounds reasonable, but does it really make sense? First of all lives matter is not saying that Black lives don't matter. That's bullshit. But she says it's only a threat if we think Black people are inferior. So let's find out. Is the Black Lives Matter movement actually only a threat to those who believe Black people are inferior? So here's a response that the Black Lives Matter movement gave in response to October 7, the worst attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust. And this is what they posted. "I stand with Palestine," it says. But pictures speak too. And in context with the picture, what does the picture show? It does not show a Palestinian civilian, an innocent person. It shows a Hamas fighter with a glider, a terrorist. These are the people who came over from Gaza to Israel and mass murdered, raped, uh, burnt babies alive. This is what happened. Um, so I stand with Palestine using this picture means I stand with the terrorist. I am on the side of the people who mass murder people. So is somebody who stands with mass murderers a threat to me only if I think black people are inferior? No, it's a threat to everybody who is not on the side of mass murderers. And I think that is a big, big problem. We see here an attitude that the Black Lives Matter movement has portrayed. So I don't want to deny that they have on the next day, after an immense backlash, kind of, but not really corrected that statement. So here they say, yesterday we sent out images that we aren't proud of. We stand with Palestine and the people who do what they must to live free. They must. It's still okay. They must do it. They must do it. There's no other option than mass murdering. That's their belief. Our hearts are with the grieving mothers who's rescuing babies, those rescuing babies from rubble who are in danger of being wiped out completely. Now, they're still basically 100% siding with Palestine, given that the only people who are since, as long as history goes, been in danger of being wiped out completely are the Jews. It's certainly not the Arabs that are in any danger anytime soon. So there's no comment whatsoever that they care about Jewish lives. No comment that Jewish lives matter. So it is a difference whether you say all lives matter or just Black lives matter, because the background thinking here is that the Palestinians are supposedly black and the Jews are supposedly white, and therefore the black lives are the ones that matter. The white lives, although they identify as white, seemingly don't. But I do want to quickly address the civilians who are used as human shields here, because people may bring it up in the comments. Let's not forget that many civilians were participating in the massacres and atrocities, as is well documented, and that an overwhelming majority elected Hamas knowing they want war, and that the masses in Gaza celebrated the massacres. Thus, many of them, including the mothers who encouraged the children to become suicide terrorists, are not quite so innocent. But I do at least want to say something about the innocent children. Without going too deep into the topic, the short and admittedly somewhat simplified answer is, of course, to anybody with any common sense, that it is Hamas who is responsible for using them as human shields. And thus, Hamas is also solely responsible for their deaths. And while Israel does more than would be reasonably expected of any other nation, including the United States, to protect innocent lives, Hamas does nothing. But Israel does, because innocent lives do matter to Israel. All lives, all innocents anyway. But what about the Jewish lives? Do they not matter to Black Lives Matter because they are defined as white? Which is actually not true. In fact, did you know that there are black Jews? Like these, or these, or these. Did you know that there were black Jews? And do their lives matter? And do they matter to Black Lives Matter? Because these are black people. And they're also in danger of being killed by Hamas. So what about them? And let's not forget that it was the Jewish people who first stood by the Black civil rights movement. Here we have a picture of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and Rabbi Joshua Herschel marched together for civil rights. What about that? So the Jewish people stood with the Black people, but did the Black people stand with the Jewish people? Apparently not, because Jewish life, and for that matter, whites that are defined, lives that are defined as white, whether that's true or not, seem not to matter for the Black Lives Matter movement. But let's hear what the founder of this movement has to say.
We can build a world where all lives matter together if we acknowledge the ways today in which all lives don't matter.
So, do we acknowledge that? Do we acknowledge that for the Black Lives Matter movement, Jewish lives do not matter? Which makes it basically as racist as the Ku Klux Klan. Consider this. That is a total fail. Does this sound too radical? Surely she comes across as nice and moderate. But maybe you can explain to me how these are any different than these. Because fundamentally, it seems that the Black protesters against Jews that spread hate to Jews are just as bad as the Ku Klux Klan. And they spread this hate because they have identified Jews as white. Now, you think that's still a bit odd? And well, they're not spreading hate, they're just pro-Palestine, are they? No, they're not. Maybe you know this guy. He, Cornell history professor Russell Rickford, who had this to say directly after the attack on October 7, where nearly 1,500 Jews were massacred.
It was exhilarating.
Resistance is life.
It was exhilarating. It was energizing.
It was exhilarating and energizing to view and hear about the mass murder of Jews, the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. That's exhilarating? Really? That is the attitude that proponents of the Black Lives Matter movement seem to have. You may think, hey, that's maybe an exception. Well, here's another example. Let's look what's actually happened on campus. So here we see a predominantly Black group of students with a few white dudes around filming the whole thing, harassing one single Jewish student. Now, I think that's as every bit as intimidating and bad as the Ku Klux Klan. I think it is. And I think it totally justifies the statement that Black Lives Matter essentially creates racism. So how do we deal with this? I think the important thing is that we understand, and here I want to go back to the linguistic part of it. Does language really matter that much? I think language creates an atmosphere. So coming back to the topic of linguistics, let's have another look at the Black Lives Matter logo. Black Lives Matter, that's the logo we know. And as I said, I originally had a bad feeling about it. It had a bad vibe. And I was second guessing myself whether I was overinterpreting it. But we've seen the results. We've seen that the people actually do have the attitude that only Black lives matter. Other lives do not seem to matter to this movement. And I think the evidence is overwhelming. So I'm not saying the logo or the slogan makes people racist. I think it's an expression of the racism that has already been there for a long time. The movement wasn't always like this. We've seen the images of Martin Luther King, who I think was a great dude, and he was clearly not racist. But after his death, at some point, the Black civil rights movement, or certainly the Black Lives Matter movement, has taken an entirely different turn. And just like the Freudian slip, where somebody says something that they didn't mean to say, but it's something that they actually thought, it expresses something that they're thinking deep inside, but they didn't actually want this to come out. Even something that we choose consciously reveals our inner attitude. And we can see this in the slogan. The slogan, there's something wrong with this slogan, and people have picked up on it, and they were right, and the movement is essentially racist. But let's suppose we have a non-racist civil rights movement. So what would that look like? What slogan could they have chosen? Well, it's very simple. We can very easily fix this. We just add a comma and say two. Black Lives Matter 2 has a totally different vibe to it. Yes, makes the whole thing a little bit longer and whatever, but it doesn't add a lot in terms of length. It's still catchy, but we have a totally different implication. Now, when we say Black Lives Matter 2, it implies there are other lives that matter. It's a given that other lives matter, but we want to say these lives matter too. We're not questioning whether the other lives matter. We're just saying, hey, you have now recognized that Black lives matter too, so please recognize this. And that would be a much more peaceful, a much more non-racist approach, a very different energy. Don't you think so? And I think even all lives matters is a fair statement to say. All lives should matter. Black lives should matter too. No more and no less than other lives. That's what I believe. But language matters, and the language you use creates a certain energy. And I think it's important to recognize this. If you like this presentation and if you found it valuable, please don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell for more videos. I'm going to make a lot more videos about language, about linguistics, and also about ethical topics. In my next video, or one of my next videos, I want to look at labels. We use certain labels. Racism. We use labels like, in this conflict, there's a lot of labels that are being used. Terrorists are called combatants. People speak about colonialism. What does it actually mean? And there's many, many other labels in many areas of life that are being used to manipulate you. And I want to show you what these labels are, how they're being used, and how you can be more aware of it, and what would be a fair label and an unfair label, and how would we know the difference. If you're interested, stay connected to the channel. I'm looking forward to see you in the next video. Bye for now, and thanks for watching.